Hello my friends, I've been using Sony FE24mm f1.4 GM for more than a year, and I think that this lens definitely deserves a long-term review. 24mm f1.4 is a very special type of lens for me personally. I really like 24mm focal length, and there is no shame in admitting that I also like shallow depth of field and f1.4 light gathering. 24mm GM combines both, and it does so pretty well. In this video, I will try to share my long-term experiences with this lens and explain why it might be my most favorite lens that I've ever tried. 24mm is in my opinion an interesting focal length. It is more all-round usable than ultra-wide focal lengths, but still more interesting than 28mm, which may look a bit generic. It is my most favorite focal length for shooting landscapes, cities, and architecture. I also like using it on a gimbal and for hands-on product shots with shallow depth of field. At f1.4, this lens is obviously extremely bright. The first way to use that brightness is for low light shooting. As I will show you later on, even at f1.4 it is optically very good, so it is ideal for just casual handheld shooting during the night, and of course for low light video. Together with incredible high ISO performance of A7 III, this is a monster low light combination, and I'm also looking forward to using it on A7S III. The other way to use f1.4 aperture is to separate the subject whilst shooting wide angle. That is quite a unique feature of 24mm f1.4 lenses. This kind of look is currently not possible to achieve with any other crop sensor, so this remains an advantage of full-frame systems. I like to use this look a lot for my hands-on shots. I think that it looks great, and it is an easy way to achieve quite unique look. Sony was able to pack all of this into extremely small and light package. 24mm GM is just 93mm long, and it only weighs 445 grams. That is 1/3 less than Sigma's counterpart. Mounted on A7 III, it is very well balanced. Surprisingly, the outer construction is plastic, but it definitely doesn't feel like a cost-saving measure. It saves weight, the plastics are very high quality, the zoom ring has rubber finish, and there are some nice details. The mount is metal of course, and it is weather sealed, which is to be expected on GM lenses. Regarding the control elements, there is actually a lot to talk about. Focusing ring is extremely smooth, it has very reasonable amount of resistance and nice grippy texture. It uses focus by wire system of course, but it is linear, and it is actually one of the better focus by wire lenses that I've tested. 24mm GM also has aperture ring. You have an option to switch between operation with clicks or smooth aperture changing. That is especially important for video because it allows you to make smooth aperture changes. You can also set it to A position and control the aperture in camera. Switch for automatic or manual focusing is available as well, and I appreciate that a lot because that is not available on A7 III, and it is more convenient than using a function button. Last but not least, we have a custom button. By default, it is set up for focus hold, it is in a good position, so it is nice to have one more custom button. I have recently retested this lens on my new scene, and the results are still fantastic. In the middle of the frame, it is perfectly sharp from f1.4 until f11. You can only see a decrease in sharpness at f16. In the corners it is already quite sharp at f1.4 as well. The sharpness raises up to f2.8, where the corners are basically perfect. With 24 megapixel sensor in A7 III, you can use this lens anywhere from f1.4 until f11. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test it with high resolution sensor, but with 24 megapixel sensor it is great. There is some amount of chromatic aberration up to f2.8, but that is very acceptable for f1.4 wide angle lens. It can be completely removed and it won't be visible. There are some digital corrections for distortion and vignetting, but for the lens of this size and this type, I would actually expect much larger corrections. These won't affect the image quality at all, so I'm okay with that. This also proves that the limitations of E-mount size is just a myth. If they can make 24mm f1.4 with this kind of optical qualities, that is all that I need to see. I've also used this lens quite a lot on A6400 APS-C camera. There it basically gives you 35mm f2 full frame equivalent. The image quality on APS-C is still fantastic. APS-C pixel density is not an issue for 24mm GM. That is in my opinion a big advantage of E-mount, because if you have both full frame and APS-C camera, you are basically getting free 35mm f2, which is pretty good deal in my opinion. Optical character is actually my most favorite thing about 24mm GM. Microcontrast of this lens may be even more impressive than the sharpness, and the rendition of colors is just beautiful. The overall image quality in combination with A7 III is outstanding. That is of course the case with both stills and video. Another part of that optical character is the rendition of bokeh. 24mm GM has 11 aperture blades, which contributes to extremely smooth bokeh. I especially like the transitions between the subjects in focus and out of focus. Even with busier scenes, there are no harsh outlines. Thanks to that 11 blade aperture, you can also get very nice stars with a direct source of light. Minimum focus distance is just 24 cm and the maximum magnification is 0.17 times. That means that you can get very close to the subject and capture an interesting perspective. In combination with f1.4 aperture, you can also get a lot of background or foreground separation when you get close to the subject. Regarding the autofocus, it is a new Sony lens on A7 III, so there is not much to talk about. It is extremely fast and extremely accurate, autofocus works great of course, and there are no issues with tracking either. In video, the autofocus is just as good as with stills. Here it depends a lot on the settings, so it can be very smooth or very fast, depending on how you set the autofocus drive speed and track sense. Unfortunately, that brings us to the only weakness of this lens, which is focus breathing. That means that when you are focusing from close distance to far distance, the lens is also zooming a little bit. Focus breathing is clearly visible. This only affects specific types of usage, but if you want to use 24mm GM as a cine lens, keep that in mind. The manual focusing is actually quite nice, besides that focus breathing. Focus ring is large enough and the turning speed is quite reasonable, so you can get decent focus pulls with this lens. One way that I like to make this lens even more special is by using filters. 24mm GM has 67mm filter thread, which is great, because it saves a lot of space and weight if you use as many filters as I do. For video, I am using excellent freewheel variable ND filters. These come in 2-5 and 6-9 stop versions. They have hard stops for preventing the X pattern, and they come with very convenient magnetic lens caps. Even at maximal intensity, I can't see any difference in the sharpness, so these are good enough at least for 6K video. I also like to use it with long exposure filters. Here I use various Freewell and Polar Pro filters. I also like to use night pollution filter for night photography. This basically cuts that yellow tint from the shots and it makes the pictures much nicer overall. Because it is a very light wide angle lens, I also use 24mm GM on gimbals a lot. It is actually my reference testing combination for all gimbal reviews on this channel. I have used it with everything from Moza Air 2 to Zion Crane 3S. Probably the best match for this combination is Weebill S. It is very small and light and more than sufficiently stable for this combination. The lens itself is not stabilized. A7 III in-body image stabilization is actually very effective at this focal length. I've been getting very good results for static shots where you can get almost tripod-like stability if you have steady hands. That also helps on gimbals because it can smooth out smaller vibrations. Importantly, there is no warping, which is often an issue with the most effective 6.5 EV stabilization systems. To sum up, as you can probably tell, I am a big fan of this lens. It is optically outstanding, very small for what it does, well built, and the autofocus is excellent. Ultra bright aperture increases the versatility and it gives you more creative options. Those who like 24mm focal length and have budget for one won't be disappointed. Basically, the only weakness of this lens is that focus breathing, but that won't concern majority of users. I'm really looking forward to using 24mm GM on A7S III when it arrives. It is only 12 megapixel camera, but I think that combination of A7S III video specs and optical character of 24mm GM will be very nice. For now, I really enjoy using this lens on A7 III and A6400, so I can highly recommend it. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section and see you next time.